an original MCM production.
I would like to also thank the League of Women Voters and MSOE for sponsoring this little presentation this evening. As Carol said, I've been very involved with ASCE, which is the American Society of Civil Engineers, and I guess before we get too far into this, I just, some of you, I see there's some people here who are from ASCE, so they know what we are about. The American Society of Civil Engineers is the nation's oldest engineering society. It was founded in 1852 in New York City, and we currently have 146,000 members in 174 countries. About 10% of the membership that we have is actually international now. We started going out international about 10 years ago, and we have many different pacts with many different countries. And you might ask, why do we do this? Okay, so I listed here the mission of ASCE is provide essential value to our members and partners, advance civil engineering, and serve the public good. The emphasis there on serve the public good. Education is helping to serve the public good. Fundamental canon number 1 of ASCE. Engineers shall hold paramount the safety, health, and welfare of the public and shall strive to comply with the principles of sustainable development, we'll talk about sustainable development a little bit later, in the performance of their professional duties. So what's happened here is ASCE has taken the report card and just to very simply put it together, they've given it grades A, B, C, D, and F. A, as you can see, is exceptional. It's fit for the future. Good is adequate for now. It might have capacity problems in the future, for example, or it might need increased maintenance, but it's good. It's in decent shape. C is mediocre. It requires attention. Again, that attention could be the actual infrastructure, the built environment itself, or it could be capacity issues. It's not ready for the future. Poor is at risk. I think all of you have seen examples of poor infrastructure. You drive around and you can see, as an example, roads and bridges are two things you see all the time. Not in the best of shape, so that is at-risk infrastructure. F is failing, critical, unfit for the intended purpose. So in 2013 was the last time ASCE released a report card. We've been doing this on basically a 4-year cycle right now. You can see from this, there are 16 different categories that we rated. The cumulative GPA for infrastructure in the United States, according to our study, is a D+. You can see on the left-hand side of the slide here where we've marked where some of them have gone up since the 2009 report card, but still, it needs help. We need more work done. So this one is showing how this all came about. Back in 1988, there was a National Council of Public Works Improvements put together something called Fragile Foundations. That was the first report card. That's the 1988 one. After that, another one wasn't done until 1998 when ASCE took this under their wing and decided to do it. And then starting in 2001, we've done it every 4 years. The next one is on schedule to come out in 2017. And I think the most important thing about this particular slide isn't necessarily the grades, but look at the bottom line and see the cost to improve infrastructure. The first time we gave it an actual number was in 2001. It was $1.3 trillion. In 2013, it's almost tripled to $3.6 trillion. That is the cost of waiting with infrastructure, because what happens is as you wait and these systems are becoming less robust, instead of just doing maintenance, we go into reconstruction, which everyone who's here from ASCE knows that the reconstruction, it's easily 10 times more expensive in most cases than the maintenance would be if you would just keep up with the maintenance. So the word out there is we're trying to make sure that we maintain what we have, because we pound for pound, we'll do better on the dollar by doing it that way than having to wait and having to reconstruct all these different systems. So we also did a cumulative infrastructure needs by system based on the current trends, and this was back in 2013 when this was released. And you can see that the yearly investment needed, the total needs, are $454 billion. The estimated funding was a little over half of that. So we have a funding gap every year of $200 billion that we feel should be expended towards infrastructure to keep it functioning at the level that we want, and I think the public really demands. So again, what can we gain with investment? By investing an additional $157 billion per year through 2020, we feel we can prevent $3.1 trillion loss in gross domestic product, $3,100 per year drop in personal disposable income per household. You know, as an example, you've got to get the shock absorbers on your car replaced because you keep, running into those ruts that have been there for the last 10 years. 1.1 trillion loss in total trade. 2.4 trillion drop in consumer spending. 3.5 million job losses. Every one of these projects puts local people to work and helps the local economy. I'm not going to speak about that. We have an expert here to speak about that, but that will be coming up later in the program. So without further ado, I'm not going to go through all 16 of the infrastructure categories because we won't have the time. But each one of these, what I'll try to do is I'll touch on what the national report card said, some solutions, and we're talking about funding solutions that ASCE feels will work in particular instances, and then also what does it mean at the state level. So for roads, as an example, 42% of major urban highways are congested. They don't work at the level of service that we would like them to work at. Everybody in here, I'm sure, at one time or another has been in a traffic jam swearing under their breath. We could prevent stuff like that if we would make the additional investment. Now, roads did improve from a D- to a D from the last two report cards, so we're making some progress, but still we're pretty far behind. Now, for anyone following what's going on nationally, we're having, budget discussions going on. The Highway Trust Fund is the major source of funding nationally for highways. Now, a few months ago, Congress just passed its 33rd consecutive extension without really addressing the problem. And from what I'm reading, there's discussion going on and some bills are being drafted, but it looks like we'll probably end up with number 34 in a row before the end of this October. The Federal Highway Administration estimates that $170 million is needed to significantly improve conditions, but currently only $91 million is funded.
Billion? Billion, right? Not billion.
This had million.
So. Billion on the slide.
Okay. Well, I'm sorry. I mistyped when I did this then. Thank you. Now, in order to do this, what are some solutions that we can use? Like I was just alluding to, you really can't just rely on the Highway Trust Fund just by itself anymore. That's not going to be adequate to do the job. You can develop performance-based investment strategies to ensure resources are directed to those projects with the best return on investment. You can increase investment at all levels of government and within the private sector. And in addition, each year of delay increases the costs to make improvements, which I sort of alluded to before. Now, one thing that's interesting is right now the state of Oregon is going through a pilot program where they are actually going to, they're having people volunteer to fund infrastructure road projects in the state, they're actually going to go to a miles charge, and they're looking at a penny per mile to certain people in lieu of using the gas tax. And the way they're looking to do it, it's a pilot program right now, and the way they're looking to do it is people that would sign up for this program at the end of the year would get all of their fuel taxes reimbursed, but they would pay a penny per mile for what they drive in the state of Oregon. They'd get a little thing like you see on TV. I think Progressive uses it for insurance rating. Put that in your car and it will keep track of the miles for you. So it'll be interesting to see. They feel they can get adequate funding by doing it that way, but they're going to go and basically start testing it first. So what does this mean in Wisconsin? As you can see from the slide, driving on roads in need of repair costs Wisconsin motorists over $1 billion a year in extra vehicle repairs and operating costs. Roughly comes out to about $280 per motorist. 71% of Wisconsin's roads are in poor or mediocre condition. This does try to take into account all Wisconsin roads, not just the state highways, not just the local roads, tries to take into account everything. Wisconsin has almost 115,000 public road miles in the state. The highway vehicle miles traveled in 2009 was a little over 10,000 per capita. It ranks 22nd in the nation as far as that is concerned. And the gas tax of 32.9 cents per gallon has not been increased in 6 years. In aviation, the grade remained a D. Commercial flights have increased by 33 million annually from 2000 to 2011, basically stretching the system's ability to be able to handle that volume of traffic. The FAA estimates the cost of congestion and delays was almost $22 billion. At current funding levels, this will continue to get worse, and they estimate it would be about $63 billion by the year 2040. Now, some of the things that can help, part of the congestion is that we're still working, a lot of the airports still use older technology. The FAA is really pushing for next gen. And next gen is a satellite-based air traffic control system rather than the ground-based system that's still in effect at some major airports. It will result in safer and more efficient air travel. Another solution would be select a dedicated funding source for implementation of next gen, such as the aviation fuel tax. Have that just go towards the next gen and getting that up and running throughout the country. Another is to increase or eliminate the cap on the passenger facilities charge. I think you've all seen that when you've flown. It's marked right on your ticket, passenger facilities charge for using the facilities that you're flying out of. So what does that mean in the state of Wisconsin? Obviously, we've got quite a few airports here. There are 133 public use airports in Wisconsin. Now, Bridges is rated as a C+. It improved from a C to a C+, so that's a good thing. Now, over 200 million trips per day are taken across what's listed as structurally deficient bridges. Those are bridges that are not structurally capable of handling the volume of traffic that's on them. There is also a thing called functionally obsolete. That means that it does not have the capacity to carry the amount of traffic just from a pure volume standpoint. As an example, if the bridge can actually handle about 6,000 vehicles per day, but there's 10,000 vehicles per day using it, that is functionally obsolete. 1 in 9 bridges is rated structurally deficient. And as I mentioned before, the grade improved from a C to a C+. Now, as far as different ways to fund improvements, one of our thoughts is make the repair of the structurally deficient bridges, especially in urban areas, a top national priority. Those are the ones that get the greatest volume of traffic, and they are very much in need of repair, and we can address a great concern by going after it from that way. We can increase the investment levels for bridge repair, reconstruction, and renovation. From all levels of government, we feel a total annual funding level about $20.5 billion would be adequate to get us up to a better grade. Develop a national strategic plan for addressing the nation's structurally deficient and functionally obsolete bridges in the upcoming decades, including long-term transportation research in order to develop more resilient bridges. And we should have a national goal of decreasing the number of just structurally deficient bridges to 8% by 2020 and decrease the percentage of the population driving over them by 75% by accomplishing that. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, 8.2% of the bridges in the state of Wisconsin are considered structurally deficient. 5.5% are considered functionally obsolete. Again, structurally deficient, that means the structure itself is inadequate. Functionally obsolete means it cannot handle the traffic that is using it and would expect to increase in the future. In fiscal year 2011, which is the last we had on this slide here, Wisconsin received $18.3 million from the Federal Highway Bridge Fund. The Wisconsin report card of 2007 gave bridges a C. Again, not a great grade, but nothing terrible either. Transit. The grade remained unchanged in transit on a national level at a D. 1/3 of Americans don't drive. 45% of households lack access to mass transit, but ridership has increased by 9% in the last decade. Deficient and deteriorating transit systems cost the U.S. economy $90 billion in 2010 to maintain. Now, some of the things that we could do here to raise the grades would be increase access to transit in urban, suburban, and rural communities. You know, in the urban area here, you have pretty good access to mass transit. You get in an area like I'm from Appleton, and there's a lot less access to mass transit than you have in this area here. And you get out in the rural communities, and there's virtually none. So we could do a better job of that. We need to adequately fund the maintenance of transit vehicles and facilities because a lot of these are getting pretty old and pretty tough to maintain. We want to repair them, reduce the life cycle costs. Continue the federal investment in transit through a robust surface transportation program. Require transit systems to adopt comprehensive asset management systems. Now, the larger systems already have that in place, but all systems should have that in place to be able to really put the money where it could be best utilized for the public. Now, Wisconsin has 70,000 annual unlinked passenger trips via transit systems, and they could be bus, heavy rail, light rail, or commuter rail. The 2007 report card of Wisconsin infrastructure gave transit a C+. Inland waterways. A lot of people don't really think about Wisconsin as having inland waterways, but actually we rank quite highly in the nation with inland waterways. Obviously, the Port of Milwaukee here as you go up Lake Michigan, ports all along there. The Port of Superior is one of the larger ports on the Great Lakes. So there is quite a bit of inland waterway. Now, the grade remained at D- as conditions remain inadequate and investment levels remain stagnant. Inland waterways are they're the hidden backbone of our freight network. They carry the equivalent of 51 million truck trips annually. There are an average of 52 service interruptions daily throughout the system. Projects take decades to approve and to complete. The current backlog of major projects that have been identified would take until 2090 to complete under the current funding levels. Now, some conclusions. Again, this is on a national basis. Solutions that would work are establish a national freight strategy and policy that incorporates all modes of transportation, including waterways and ports, including state-level strategies, and include other key stakeholders such as shippers, retailers, and manufacturers. Increase overall spending on inland waterways, secure additional financing for projects. Again, you could do it through the barge fuel tax or implementing a user fee. And prioritize capital budgets according to risk and reliability, as well as upon economic return. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, we have 230 miles of inland waterways. We're the 29th largest in the nation. I think a lot of people are surprised when they hear that. The next category is rail. The grade increased from a C- to a C+ on rail. In 2012, Amtrak recorded its highest year of ridership at 31.2 million and has doubled its ridership since 2000. Both freight and passenger rail have been investing nearly $20 billion annually in infrastructure improvements. Freight rail has been renewing rails at the rate of a little over 3,000 miles per year, basically the equivalent of a coast-to-coast trip. Now, in order to increase the grade of rail, we could integrate rail into a national multimodal transportation policy that recognizes and takes advantage of efficiencies in the movement of people and goods. We could improve passenger rail in dense urban corridor markets and as an alternative to air and auto travel to inner city markets. Now, Wisconsin has 8 freight railroads, have almost 3,400 miles of track, ranking at 14th in the nation by mileage. Dams. Dams received a grade in 2013 on a national level of D. The grade remained unchanged. There are 84,000 dams in the United States. The average age of those dams is 52 years old. The number of high hazard dams, and by high hazard, that means that if a dam breaches, there's probable loss of life, is 14,000 in 2012. The Association of State Dam Safety Officials estimates that $21 million is needed to repair just these high hazard dams. Now, some of the conclusions: reauthorize the dam safety program, establish a national dam rehabilitation and repair funding program to cost share repairs for publicly owned non-federal high hazard dams. Every dam, especially the high hazard ones, should have an emergency action plan in place. Not all of them do. The high hazard ones have the greatest percentage, but they don't all have an emergency action plan. They should all be in place. Encourage incentives to governors and state legislators to provide the sufficient resources and regulatory authorities to their dam safety programs, and require federal agencies that own, operate, or regulate dams to meet the standards of the federal guidelines for dam safety. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, the dams received in 2007 a report card grade of C-. The dam safety program has 6.25 full-time employees. On average, they have to oversee over 150 dams. Wisconsin has 252 high hazard dams. 70% of the state regulated dams have an emergency action plan. 70% is good, but it should be better. And the state dam safety program has an annual budget of about $750,000. Wastewater. Nationally, in 2013, the grade improved from a D- to a D. The estimated investment needs in wastewater are $298 billion over the next 20 years. Most of this is actually in the pipes, because in many areas you have pipes in the ground that are well over 100 years old. And I think you've all seen some examples of when pipes have failed and roads basically get washed out and cars fall into the roadways. It's not a pretty scene. It's certainly not something we strive for. It's something that we need to be better at getting away from that. So sanitary sewer need is the majority of the amount here. It's not so much the storm sewer, it's the sanitary sewer, although the storm sewer needs are also increasing. So some conclusions for raising the grades in wastewater are to raise awareness of the true cost of water, the cost of water pumping, the cost of water treatment, to get water to everybody in here, to every facility. Establish a federal water infrastructure trust fund to finance projects. There has been some legislation that has been introduced in Congress to do just that. And I believe it's been going back and forth between the House and the Senate, but there has been legislation introduced on that. Another one that's interesting is separate potable and non-potable water. And the reason for that is because, as an example, most of the facilities that are around the state, or even federally, they're not separated at all. You don't need drinking water quality to water your lawn. You don't need drinking water quality to wash your clothes. It's estimated that if we would separate those systems, which is a large undertaking, that in the long term we could save money because we wouldn't have to have as large of drinking water treatment facilities. Now, in the state of Wisconsin, the report card is a B-, one of the better ones in the state of Wisconsin. But even Wisconsin has reported a $6.4 billion wastewater infrastructure need over the next 20 years. Next, we'll address drinking water. On a national scale, drinking water, the grade improved from a D- to a D. There are an estimated 240,000 water main breaks annually on a national level. I think we've all been inconvenienced, whether it's been going down a street and there was a water main break and you had to take a detour, or there was a water main break and you were out of water. It happens a lot. These pipes are very old. I didn't bring it tonight, but I actually have a piece of wood water main that came from the Green Bay Water Utility that was actually pulled out of the ground in the 1950s. That had been in the ground for about 80 years. So at that time, they still had wood water mains that were supplying water around the city. I can tell you that they've all been taken out now. So I have that confirmed by the water utility. So anyway, you get to the point where pipes are over 100 years old. Part of the problem is there's massive corrosion within the pipes that really lessen the ability for the pipes to move water around. So in addition to them being possibly structurally efficient, they're not efficient at all because they can't move the water the way that they should. Now, some of the conclusions are reinvigorate the state revolving loan fund program under the Safe Drinking Water Act by reauthorizing minimum funding, and they recommend $7.5 billion over 5 years. Eliminate the state cap on private activity funds for water infrastructure projects to bring an estimated $6 to $7 billion in new private financing for drinking water projects. Again, the Wisconsin report card from 2007 gave it a grade of a C. Wisconsin reported $6.2 billion in drinking water infrastructure needs over the next 20 years. Solid waste. On a national standpoint, the solid waste is rated as a B-. That's a slight increase from a C+ from 2009. Nationally, we generate about 250 million tons of trash annually. we recycle about 34% of our waste. Now this has more than doubled since 1980, so that's a good thing. But again, it's something that we can strive to do better with. Per capita waste generation has held steady over the last 20 years and is actually starting to show a slight decline. And that is more from the education standpoint where that is coming about. People are more in tune with it, especially the younger generation. Some conclusions that would work here: encourage greater use of landfill gas to energy conversion to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and create new energy sources. Implement source reduction policies that call for better design, packaging, and lifespan of commercial products. In the state of Wisconsin, the grade is a B-. The number of landfills has increased from 2000 until 2013, when this was done, from 37 to 32. However, the average landfill size has increased substantially. And this I found very interesting. Approximately 20% of the landfilled waste landfilled in the state of Wisconsin comes from neighboring states. We're good neighbors, but maybe we don't want to be that good. Energy. Yeah. Energy. On a national level, the grade is unchanged. It's a D+. America relies on an aging electrical grid and pipeline distribution system, some of which originated back in the 1880s. Investment in power transmission has increased over the past decade, but ongoing permit issues, weather events, and limited maintenance have contributed to an increasing number of failures and power interruptions. In the upper Midwest here, we're actually very lucky. We don't run into that as much, but it still happens on occasion. The availability of energy in the form of electricity, natural gas, and oil will become a greater challenge as the population increases. So some conclusions that could work here are: adopt a national energy policy that anticipates and adapts to future energy needs. Provide mechanisms for timely approval of transmission lines. Identify and prioritize risk to energy security. Obviously, that's a huge issue now. Design and construct additional transmission grid infrastructure. Create incentives to promote energy conservation, and continue research to improve and enhance the nation's transmission and generation infrastructure. Wisconsin received a grade of B. Pretty good grade. We're okay there. Wisconsin produces almost 4.6 gigawatt hours of renewable energy every year. We rank 27th in the nation. Schools. Schools received a grade of D in 2013. That grade was unchanged since 2009. School construction has diminished to approximately half the level of funding prior to the recession. Almost half of the schools were built to educate the baby boomers, a generation that is now retiring from the workforce. Estimates to maintain our nation's school facilities are usually around $270 billion. Again, some conclusions. Okay, some ways to raise the grades. Publish regular updates of the report on the condition of America's public schools facilities, so you have a clear view of what's going on. Encourage school districts to adopt regular, comprehensive, major maintenance, renewal, and construction programs. Expand federal and state tax credits and matching funds for school districts. Explore alternative financing, including possible lease financing, as well as ownership and use arrangements to facilitate school construction projects. Those are just some of the ways that we could make this work. Now, from a state level, Wisconsin report card gave it a C. Public school districts in Wisconsin spend a total of $1.5 billion on capital outlays for school construction, acquisition of land and existing structures, in the fiscal years 2005 through 2008, and it's estimated that Wisconsin schools have a $4.4 billion infrastructure funding need. So after going through all of the, or some of the categories here, you can see from the slide here what this means in the state of Wisconsin. This is all information that I've presented previously, but you can see how severe this is. 252 high hazard dams, 6.2 billion for drinking water, 6.4 billion for wastewater to maintain and upgrade, over 1,100 structurally deficient bridges, 71% of our roads are poor or mediocre quality, and the bottom line is it costs all of us, costs motorists roughly $280 per year. Now, Wisconsin's report card, again back from 2007, was a C. Not great, not terrible, but we can do a lot better than that. So we can raise the grades nationally with these key solutions. Increasing leadership in infrastructure renewal. You hear about it on the national news, where someone will come out, especially now, the politicians are saying we need to spend money on infrastructure. But when it comes time to actually make it happen, it always seems to fall short. Promote sustainability and resilience. Sustainability, basically that means optimal use of shrinking resources. It means environmentally friendly, and it means reuse, recycle, reconstruct. Not try to get into building a whole new thing. Let's utilize what we have to the best of our abilities. Resilient, that means how quickly do systems recover after disaster? Good examples are Katrina, Superstorm Sandy. Superstorm Sandy knocked out the East Coast transit systems for a long time. And that is resilience. They were not very resilient systems. And the other would be develop and fund plans to maintain and enhance America's infrastructure. All of this information is available at the infrastructure report card, www.infrastructurereportcard.org. There's also a mobile app for it, so anybody can go and get this information. And you can get a lot more information on there than what I was able to present to you tonight. So, and I did put the PowerPoint on some paper outside that I see some of you have picked up, and feel free to take that. And basically, that is the end of my part of this. And I'd like to thank you for listening, and I'll be back up here later in case there are any questions.
First thing I want to say is I agree completely. We should be funding education a lot more, and I'm not just saying that to be self-serving, that we just had $250 million cut from our budget. I think ultimately funding education is critical as well to infrastructure, and I'll say some things on that as we go forward. I was struck while Carl was talking and a little depressed because we're going to have a presidential debate happening in a few minutes here nationally. We're all here, which is good. You're going to learn more here. One of the reasons is because no one is going to be on that stage, I guess. I could be wrong, but my guess is no one is going to be asked about infrastructure, despite what we've just been told here. We've just been told we're basically every couple of years losing a couple $1 trillion because our infrastructure is in disrepair. And the only thing that you're going to see people talking about on stage is bragging about how little money they've spent or how they've reduced the amount they've spent in their state. As if that's something to brag about. I mean, isn't spending money wisely something that we should be talking about? Spending money on things that matter. Things that we know that the return on the investment is there. And that's what I'm going to talk about today, making wise choices as a government and how infrastructure investment is one of those wise choices. You know, those are big price tags that Carl put up there. But the price tags are going to be a lot bigger tomorrow. This is something that it doesn't matter whether we can afford to do it. We can't afford not to. And we have to figure out where to start and where to move forward with this. My expertise is primarily not in transportation economics. I did gain a lot of experience with fiscal policy, however, while I worked under the Bush administration, where I was appointed, and I was kept on a bit under the Obama administration. So a lot of what I'll say will be informed by what I learned there about fiscal policy and how fiscal policy is formed, and some of what went right and what went wrong in the Recovery Act in terms of infrastructure spending. The fact I worked for both administrations, and if you go back a little bit farther, I also worked for Rick Santorum decades ago. These are basic economic principles that, in good times, sane people listen to. They listen to these economic principles and help them inform decisions. I mean, we're at a period now where shiny objects are distracting people. The only construction you're going to hear about now is building walls. Building a wall between us and Mexico, building a wall between us and Canada. Now, granted, that's going to create some jobs temporarily, but it's going to cost $1 bazillion, and there will be no economist that would agree that will have any economic return in the future. It will only be an economic disaster in the long run. So you could take what I say, but my track record was not great. This was my term at the Council of Economic Advisors. I started in June of 2008, and I was responsible for advising the members of the Council of Economic Advisors who advised the president on labor issues, and we lost 7 million jobs. But that was a period where we learned maybe what could be done, and we spent a lot of time looking to our past to figure out what had worked in the past with job creation. The Stimulus Act was passed, and I truly believe that the stimulus stopped us from heading in this direction, leveled us off, and moved us a bit up. I mean, if I move this graph into the future, we're actually above 140 million right now. Now, if we, but that's still not as rosy of a picture as it seems. I mean, if we were keeping on the trend growth we were on, we would be up in 147 million. So there's still a jobs gap. And it turns out that a big part of that jobs gap, tell me in a second, is in construction. So in answer to your question, we don't even have to train a lot of people. A lot of these people are ready to do these jobs. They're just doing something else that doesn't match their skills. And I'll show some pictures later on that will support that. So let's move forward a little bit. Now, I mentioned the Recovery Act, and this was the recession, right? And we began to spend a little bit on roads during the recession as part of the Reinvestment and Recovery Act. And you saw that public spending on roads as a percentage of GDP grew. I mean, we were declining for some time. The primary reason on this is a lot of what we were spending on the government was on wars and on a rising Medicare and Medicaid costs. So that was cutting into GDP. But construction in terms of roads and bridges did have a bit of a bounce back. But then it dropped again. Right when the Recovery Act dollars dried up, there was a time period where a lot of people said, wow. And you even saw that in the report card. The report card did look a little bit better when some of the roads and bridges were repaired. I mean, the worst of those grades that I saw were 2009, 2010, right? But the momentum that we had died. And during the presidential campaign, 2011, President Obama did put together an American Jobs Act, of which investment in infrastructure was a big part of that. Now, it was inadequate compared to the needs that Carl presented earlier, but at least it wasn't keeping up with the momentum that we had. That Jobs Act was not passed. The reason being, and I'll jump down to there, the opponents called it the son of stimulus. Even though within that American Jobs Act, there was a lot of infrastructure investment that was present there, there were a lot of other things that Republicans and many Democrats said, well, this just looks like another stimulus package, and the appetite for the American public to do that is not there. So it failed. And with it came some pretty good ideas. Spending $50 billion on infrastructure, creating the National Infrastructure Bank, which incidentally was a Republican idea. It was a joint Dodd-Hagel idea, right? But it originated from the Republican side. And what the National Infrastructure Bank would do was it would start with a capitalization from the federal government of $10 billion. Then it would just have private and public investors bid ultimately on projects that would be deemed winners, and ultimately could again get low interest loans, and those infrastructure projects that could optimize the greatest return would then be invested in. That failed as well, as did creating a nationwide wireless network. We're basically woefully inadequate compared to the rest of the world, the developed world, in terms of our wireless connections. Many parts of this country do not have access. That's becoming critically important. But these good ideas were just thrown away. Now, I'm not going to just blame the Republicans for this. President Obama would not break this into pieces. He would not compromise on this at all. And this was a period of time where he blamed the other side for all of the failure of this ability to jolt the economy a bit more. So we were all at a loss then because of this political impasse. But let's take a step back. And let's forget about the politics for a second. I'll get back to that in a little bit. But let's talk about why the government, when a government should spend money. Because we're just bombarded with this rhetoric that government spending is bad. Deficits are bad. Debt is bad. Deficits and debt are bad. I'm not going to deny that. Right? But what you're doing with that spending matters. The return that you're going to get for taking on that debt matters. So when we're thinking about what the government should be doing with taxpayer money, there's really a two-part test. We should ask ourselves, is this something that the private market can provide efficiently? If the private market can provide that good efficiently, maybe we should look for ways to back off as a government and let the private market flourish. Right? There are some things, though, that a private market cannot provide. Police protection. Right? We can't all have our own private police force. Right? Because the fact that there is no way for us, our willingness to pay, and administratively, the ability to extract our ability to pay, is not going to allow each of us to have a private market provide a police force for us. So the government needs to collect taxpayer money and decide on a size of the police force that will protect us. Roads are another thing, right? The reason is that roads in economics, we call things whether a good is excludable or not. Roads are not excludable. Some of them are. You can have toll roads where a private company would put up a toll road and put toll booths and stop people from coming on. You could have a private dam. You could have a private ferry. But eventually, you're going to have to connect yourselves to places, and you're not going to be able to restrict people from getting on those roads. Some roads will have to be free to pass. Free in terms of you can't stop people from utilizing those. So there'll only be a free rider problem. So the government has to decide on where and how to pay for these roads. It's something that is good that the government needs to provide. So if we've decided that it's something that the private market cannot provide, and the government is the only entity big enough and coordinated enough to be able to provide that good to us, then we have to ask the question whether or not the benefit outweighs the cost. And here is where transportation investments, infrastructure investments win every time. They pay for themselves. They more than pay for themselves. The benefit outweighs the cost. It's something we cannot afford not to do. It's easy to find small improvements even that are cost effective, that you should be able to convince anyone next to you in a bar or a restaurant, right? Potholes. The guy next to you is going to be complaining about potholes. Well, you'll say, yeah, potholes are going to cost you probably, if not this year, it'll cost you next year somewhere between $300, $1,000, $1,500 in repairs on your car. Wouldn't you be willing to pay a couple cents extra a gas tax to pay for that, to avoid that? Yeah, your benefits would outweigh your cost. But as soon as that tax word is mentioned, we can't get anywhere. All right, taxes are a bad word. So people just put up they have this visceral reaction to taxes, not even thinking about what they could possibly be used for, that maybe it'd be something that we're going to get even more back for. No, taxes go into some black hole that have no use whatsoever. Now, I can see where some people think that because our tax dollars are being used to subsidize billionaire basketball stadium down the street. But, I could see where people are thinking our tax money isn't going to be used wisely. But in this case, we're all going to get this money back if we invest it. So the benefits are also wider spread the larger the investments we consider. But of course, the costs are greater. Some of these big projects that Carl said are necessary are extremely expensive. But the good thing about these projects, these large projects, are this is infrastructure. This is a long-lived capital asset. We're not going to lose it. The previous generation or two thought enough about us to gift us all of these roads. And if we take care of them, they'll last the next generation as well. This is a long-lived capital asset that does not go away. It will have returns now, returns to the next generation, returns to the following generation. It will attract businesses and residents to town. If we have a crumbling infrastructure, that's going to be more costly to the companies trying to do business in town. It's going to increase their operating costs because their trucks are going to break down. They're not going to be able to ship their products as efficiently. So this is going to have more long-lived benefits for us. So all of these things we have to consider. The larger the investments, the benefits become very large. And the other thing, simply investing in infrastructure creates jobs and provides a jolt to the economy. It's what we call the multiplier effect in economics. Construction workers are put back to work if we invest in our infrastructure. They get money. Government spending equals contractor and worker income. Contractor employees and construction workers spend that money. That keeps businesses open. Those businesses then can employ people. Those employees spend more money. So if you can put workers back to work, and construction workers, particularly those who work on bridges and highways, are dependent on federal funding to get them back to work to utilize their skills, that's going to pay. That's the way to match their skills to what they were trained for. They'll get the money, they'll then spend the money, that will circulate back in the economy, and we'll all be better off. And we have a big group of construction workers who are able to get back to work. This is construction as a share of total employment. Notice during the recession, this bottomed out. We haven't really added much to that since then. So if we're looking for a group of people, we talk about skill mismatch all the time. That's a big buzzword that you hear. And economists sometimes get a little confused by that. Right? Especially when it's something like this. Right? If these are people, if we want to have people matched to have their skills matched to but they say, okay, well, some people's skills are obsolete. No, these workers' skills are not all obsolete. It's repairing infrastructure where they were trained. Now, maybe there might be some cases where we could invest in community college programs that could bring some of their skills up to speed, but by and large, a lot of their skills are ready to be utilized. This is another picture that I'm going to link back to something Carl said. This is the 10-year Treasury constant maturity rate. This is interest rate. This is the rate at which we can borrow. Note that this thing is down right here. The 10-year rate is down well below 2.5%, like the lowest it's ever been. We all know this. We're refinancing our houses. We bought houses. We know the interest rate is really low. We don't have to be reminded of that. But what does that mean? It means we can borrow from tomorrow to pay for all of these infrastructure projects now. Oh, borrowing is a horrible, horrible thing. We're going to be put in debt. Oh, I'm ruining our country. Think back to what Carl just said, though. What we've been doing increased our costs from $2.2 trillion to $3.6 trillion of needed repairs or needed infrastructure projects in just 5 or 6 years. That's an interest rate of 40 or 50%. We're basically putting ourselves into debt by not doing the repairs that we need, when all we would have to do is borrow now at 2.5%, pay for the infrastructure we need, it'll pay for itself. Well, if you borrow debt, won't this be deficit? No, the people we put back to work will pay taxes. Those taxes will go into federal revenues. That will reduce the deficit. Yes? Yes. This is 1980, right? 1980 to today. This is basically a proxy for the interest rate we all face. I mean, it's just a 10-year constant maturity. It's kind of a summary measure of what the interest rate is or what our borrowing costs are. If we think back to the last time we had a major recession in the United States, these shades are recessions. The last major recession we really had was at the beginning of the Reagan administration. And Reagan got us out of that recession pretty quickly. By doing what? Spending like mad. And the borrowing costs were very high at that time. But at least at that time in the United States, we weren't so disillusioned with politicians and governments to the extent that we didn't accept, we were still able to accept the fact that we could borrow against tomorrow and pay a bit, right? Even though the interest rate was much higher, our ability to borrow now for projects that have a return we're in a much better shape to do that now than we were before. But we're still not borrowing to pay for these infrastructure projects that we'll easily be able to pay back tomorrow. Yep.
That second drop, right after you said you had the Reagan administration first, why did it drop so hard there, and why did it continue to drop? So that tendency right there, right after you said the big spurt of the Reagan administration.
Yeah, we were in a period we had big inflation in the late 1970s. And what happened is monetary policy of the time as well, in conjunction with the stimulus, Reagan didn't call it stimulus, but the spending of Reagan brought the interest rate down. And that continued to stay down because we really didn't face any inflationary pressure to increase those interest rates. So those interest rates kept going at a moderate pace. We had the greatest period of growth in modern American history in the 1990s. And that allowed us to keep interest rates relatively low. And then, borrowing costs continued to stay reasonably low throughout the next decade. I mean, over this time period, you had Greenspan, who was in the head of the Fed, and he was definitely one who was interested in stabilizing the interest rates. So how much does it cost? And this is something that you'll often hear people throw out. How much does it cost in government spending to create a job? Right? We often hear that when we talk about, putting people back to work. So we have a lot of evidence that came with the recent Stimulus Act, because the money was spread out across the country by design. So everybody got a little bit of the stimulus pie. So economists, whenever you have something spread across a large area by a centralized government, economists jump on that because we think we can tell, we can compare what happened in this area when the spending increased to that area when it didn't increase as much and see what spending actually buys you. And a couple of Dartmouth economists were one of many studies that came out, but probably the one I think is best, that looked at the stimulus and said, what worked? And they broke up the stimulus spending into 3 major categories. transfers to state and municipalities. This was government. This was money that the federal government sent to the states and municipalities to make up their debts, so they could pay teachers and they could do things as make up Medicaid shortfalls to kind of fix their state programs. Those transfers created no jobs. Why? Because many of the states and municipalities said, great, a check from the federal government, we're just going to pay down our debt and reduce taxes, we're done. And that created no jobs. The money that was spent to what we say in economics, increasing the consumption of the liquidity constrained, that's a fancy way of saying food stamps and unemployment benefits. Giving food stamps and unemployment benefits to people who are out of work or having reduced income created about $100,000 of investment, created 1.09 jobs. So pretty effective by and large for stimulus, because ultimately, why did that work to some extent? It worked because these people weren't spending money without jobs. This allowed money in their pockets to keep businesses open while they spent money on retail, other products, stop people from being put out of work. Infrastructure was the best, was a very good investment in terms of $100,000 created 1.03 jobs. But the great thing about infrastructure compared to these other ones is this does not take into account any long-term improvements in efficiency of the transportation. It doesn't take into account any of our enjoyment of better roads. It doesn't take into account lower repair costs in the future. So this is a stimulus investment that looks like, $100,000 you might say is a decently large amount for one job, but this is going to create jobs long into the future as well. So this is the one bit of investment that we have that will pay dividends into the future as well. So why still is, when we think about job creation, why is infrastructure still so low on the list? When everybody talks about a jobs plan, when we have politicians saying, I want to put people back to work, why is infrastructure, even though it's the most effective way to get people back to work and has the highest multiplier of any government spending, why not? Well, for one thing, the group that is in charge right now tends to come from the right side of the aisle, and infrastructure is very low on their list of things that they think will improve jobs. Reducing government regulation is the highest thing, along with keeping manufacturing jobs here. That's not a policy. That's just a goal. Helping small businesses and lowering taxes. The one thing that could help many of these is improving infrastructure. Improving infrastructure can help small businesses. It can keep manufacturing here. It's the one thing that catches all of these, and it's an actual policy. But it's sort of left by the wayside. So it's no surprise that tonight the politicians won't be asked about infrastructure, because this is a Gallup poll. People don't care. I mean, there's discussions like this that can we need leadership, which was the first point Carl made. We need people to demand these improvements. I mean, we need an understanding from the population that the only way you can make these improvements is through government spending on these projects. Things aren't much better if we move to the left. Infrastructure moves up a little bit as something that the left finds important, but still they're talking about government relations, government regulation as well, and helping small businesses. And this is a bit of the rhetoric that we hear. I mean, a big part of the rhetoric when we think about job creation or improving the economy, the government is the enemy, people think. And because businesses just need to be protected and need to be allowed to create jobs. Businesses don't create jobs. Customers create jobs. We are a consumption-driven economy. 70% of our GDP is consumption. To improve the economy, to keep people in work, we need people to buy stuff. So getting construction workers back to work, having them then pay, that's going to keep customers happy. Getting their products on time because we have solid infrastructure is going to keep customers happy. Keeping open trade channels through our waterways, our airports. That's going to keep customers happy and keep the economy growing. You know, a business sitting there is not going to sit there and create jobs in and of itself unless the customers are happy and they can serve those customers better. Now, granted, I'm not going to say there's regulations that we should reconsider. There are some counterproductive regulations that probably get in the way of some people being able to be employed. But infrastructure improvement is a much better first step. Finally, I'm going to just repeat what I said before because I think this is really important, because I know some people get very uncomfortable even now after this talk and after Carl's talk about, you know, we should spend more on infrastructure. Or even when I said we should borrow, that got people really uncomfortable. Because look, I mean, this is our national debt. That looks pretty bad. The problem is that debt is only going to increase more rapidly the less we do with infrastructure.
Could you do the axes again?
Yes, this axis on the right is our debt as a percent of GDP.
And the numbers go from what?
1985 to 2015.
And the debt?
The debt goes all the way up to 110% of GDP. That's bad. I'll admit that. That's a high debt. That's a high debt. But what that tells us is we should think about more wisely what's putting us into debt. And maybe we can use things that would allow us to pay down that debt a little in the future, like infrastructure payment that will then generate more tax revenue in the future by keeping workers employed. We should think about things like that instead of things that put us in more debt. Building up our military to the extent that it's built up. Spending unwisely on health care when there are more efficient ways to deliver health care to our population. I'll just throw this out since my expertise is in health. You know, people say, oh, well, the government should stay out of health care. Do you know which country spends the most, their government spends the most on health care in the world? It's not the United States, even though our government only provides the health care to half the population. We spend more on Medicaid, enough on Medicare and Medicaid alone to outdo every other country in terms of their state-run healthcare systems per person. Right? So basically, we're spending twice as much on the healthcare of the people so we're keeping government out of even something like that. We could just do these things a little more wisely to keep us out of debt. I'll leave it with this because this is my favorite slide. Right? Debt scares people, but we should be more scared about deferred maintenance, is deferring debt and larger debt to future generations. That's all I have.
An MCM production.